Hello, my name is Dick Rosasco. I am your instructor for IT 642, Information Assurance. There are some things we should probably cover. One, I'm actually behind a big pane of glass. This is called a Lightboard. It's a new piece of teaching technology. It's kind of awesome. It allows me to sort of talk at you the same way I would in a classroom, only without the burden of having to ship you here, which is kind of cool. It also lets us do some interesting things where I can actually draw rather than just record in the classroom regularly. So I can do things like this. My spelling is not any better than anybody else's. And things you should know about this class, before we go too much farther, is we're working from a model. It's not the only model. We'll talk about the other ones later. But it's built on this idea of working with information assurance as a set of attributes, a set of qualities we want our systems, notice I don't say computers, our systems, it's a different thing, to have. I'll make sure we'll throw that up there. System is kind of a loaded word for someone like me, and now for someone like you, because we talk about things like people and processes, not just computers. So just when you thought this was going to get simple, we introduced people into it. The model we're going to use has a very convenient, useful acronym to remember it by, and CIA-NA. 5 words, you should know this. Confidentiality, integrity, as my spelling gets worse and my handwriting gets even worse, availability, non-repudiation, and, maybe you want to guess, authentication. We're going to spend a lot of time on each of these words individually, but you should generally remember that this is the game plan for the remainder of the semester. These 5 words, to someone like me who comes from the software engineering part of computer science, have another name. They're not just attributes, they're qualities. They're things that we want our system to have. They're behaviors that we want our system to have. And more importantly, we want to actually know that they really have it. So we will try to take each of these very broad terms and break it down a little bit, both in terms of where they come from and in terms of how we achieve this with a digital system. Big idea, digital. So this might not be the most exciting trip you've ever taken, but it's one that will hopefully inform how you learn about this stuff and give you a mental framework, that's kind of the big goal, what we call a student learning objective, for getting through this class. If you can understand a system in the context of these 5 attributes, you're a really long way towards understanding what it means to be secure or not secure according to this model. Again, we'll talk about whether we like this model or not as the semester progresses. Thank you for hanging in there, and that's the end of this little explanatory bit. Hello again, and welcome back to IT 642. The phrase information assurance is one we're actually going to talk about in some detail, especially in the context of that pesky model, which we'll keep talking about. Things you should know immediately that we need to worry about, and this is one of those things, welcome to an academic environment, we get really spun up about definitions. So what does this idea information assurance really refer to? We have the model to tell us how we achieve attributes that give us information assurance. But what does the term itself actually mean? Why is this a class? I mean, if you take the classic CS undergraduate programming languages course, we're going to talk to you about programming languages. What does it mean to talk about information assurance? Well, let's do the historical breakdown here. Information, it's a nice way of saying data. Content, it's a more modern term. And then the slightly trickier word, we'll bring in from the other side, assurance. What does it mean to be assured of your data? Well, that's why we use the model. Those 5 attributes, C-I-A-N-A, mean that we have belief in the integrity, in the availability, can't spell, and so on, of our system. Not only the system, but also the data within it. In practice, this means we have a reasonable belief that our credit card data isn't being exported to some country where it's going to be turned into, interesting vehicular or other illicit purchases without our consent. I mean, if you consent to it, I can't help you. That's actually okay. But we are going to spend a lot of time talking about this idea of being assured, of having a reasonable belief, or at least having raised the stakes for somebody to break in and mess with our stuff. We're also going to worry about what does that mean from not only from the defensive side, but what does it look like from the offensive side? This is a common, on one hand, on the other, I think computer security stole it from economics kind of notion that we use a lot. So we will talk about the offense-defense notion frequently, both breaking in and trying to build nice secure walls and a moat. What are we building that moat around? Around our content, around information that we want to protect. We also talk about, because it's a running system, that's where things like availability come in, where we try to make sure that when we want to be serving customers, when we want to be doing stuff with other people, when the system is being relied upon by individuals, that this attribute is in place, that we are assured that is up and useful to other people. So as we progress through the semester, we're really going to break down what each of those words mean, where they come from, and oh yeah, by the way, this is another one of those pesky academic-y kind of things, none of these ideas is really new. All of the lecture notes, which you'll get along with each of these modules, also will elaborate for you this idea that this is just the digital version of a much longer idea that hasn't gone away, and sometimes this had some pretty drastic solutions for making sure nothing goes wrong with it. The digital one, usually a little tidier, a little less messy in some cases, but these are not new ideas. These are attributes that people have wanted for their communication and transaction systems for a really long time. So keep that in mind. We talk about information, we're talking about stuff that we don't want to be running away. It's not just credit card information, it's not just personal information, it's the overall nature of the system. In some cases, you can even misplace, aka lose integrity and confidentiality on the actual software that makes the system go. We'll look at an example of that. We'll also talk about how losing availability does not mean your server has crashed, it just might mean somebody can't get to it. We'll also look at the side effects of that. What happens when people become accustomed to having these 5 attributes, or at least the systems that you deal with having these 5 attributes, and what happens when they go away, what happens when they fail, and how we plan and how we try to get our heads around this notion of this defensive measure of, okay, I have my castle, I also have an emergency escape from my castle in the event that my castle is going to collapse in on me. We're going to look at all of those options as this kind of broad portfolio, and we're going to look at across all of the ranges that make up the computer security sub-communities. So welcome to massive scoping. It'll be fun, I promise. And we'll also be looking at where this intersects with other parts of the computing and security, not just the security communities, but the computing community, I can't say 2 C's in a row, as a whole. So it's okay. We're going to cover a lot of ground here, and don't be scared. I'm not expecting you to master every single nuance. I am expecting you to try to follow along with this and hang on to permanently this idea that we are after information and assurance, that we are looking at all of this through the lens of the questions that make up, do I have my 5 attributes? Do I have a reasonable belief that I've achieved them? And what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my systems? And what do I need to do to convince my boss, my management, the person paying the bills, that maybe we need to expend some more time or effort or money on it? Thank you very much.